What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, we got a good one for you guys. Last week, we talked about some wide receiver sleepers to be targeting in the later rounds, and in today's video, we're going to be doing the same except for the running back position. As we know, each and every year, there are running backs that are drafted in the later rounds that make major impacts for our fantasy teams. Oftentimes, we hear people use the term one injury away, and that statement couldn't be held truer when we're talking about the running back position. When running backs do go down with injuries, oftentimes they are significant to hold them out for weeks at a time, and in their absence, the next man up can be putting up monster fantasy performances. In today's video, we will be going over a few players that do fit that bill, but before we do, stat of the day. Today's stat of the day is among players to finish the season with 90 or more receptions, which player finished with the lowest catch rate. Once again, that's which receiver to post 90 or more receptions in 2020 had the league's lowest catch rate. Leave your answer in the comment section down below. We'll be happy to let you know who wins in tomorrow's video. Also, guys, just a friendly reminder that we do currently have a promotion going on, 15% off all of our draft packages. To lock in this discount yourself, all you have to do is use code FFA at checkout. Just keep in mind that this offer is about to expire. This offer is only valid through the end of April, and with today being April 27th, this is going to be one of the final days that you're able to lock in this promotion. If you're interested in that, go to our website today. That's thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Link for that, as always, in the description box below. Without further ado, though, let's hop right into the video. And the first player that we're bringing up today is none other than Giovanni Bernard of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. As we all know, Giovanni Bernard is a veteran in the league heading into his 9th season, and his career can be easily summarized as a successful backup. Although he has been able to put together a few successful seasons in Cincinnati playing that backup role, it shouldn't come as too much of a surprise that they were willing to let him go. He is, of course, an aging running back, like we had mentioned, heading into his 9th pro season, which is a pretty lengthy career by any running back standard. So with him getting up there in age, combined with his financial demands for the team, the Cincinnati Bengals did feel comfortable enough to let him go. I think I speak for many of us when I say that we believe Giovanni Bernard always had a little bit more to give than the average backup, meaning in those cases where he was thrust into the RB1 position, typically he would have more output than we would expect from other backup running backs across the league. I would even go as far to say that throughout certain parts of his career, he's even looked better than some of the starters that other teams have ran out there. One thing that is for sure, though, is that a lot of his production on the ground over the past couple years has definitely taken a dip. In fact, over the past 3 seasons, he has not been able to eclipse over 4 rushing yards per carry, a mark that he was consistently hitting in earlier parts of his career so long as he was getting the volume. So we knew that as soon as his days in Cincinnati were over, at least at this point in his career, he is going to be relegated to a specialist type of role, that being to focus more on his pass catching skill set. He has historically always been one of the better running backs on third downs, being a running back with very sure hands, as seen by his over 450 targets he's received throughout his entire NFL career. With that said, Giovanni Bernard couldn't have found a better landing spot than that of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who have been desperate to fill this type of role in their backfield since Tom Brady had entered from New England. There were some early drummings that we could possibly see James White over in Tampa Bay. Then most recently, there was even hype articles and news outlets reporting that Keyshawn Vaughn was to see an expanded role in the receiving game. And while most of those rumors can now be put to rest with the signing of Giovanni Bernard, one thing that is for sure is that there were drummings of offensive production to be coming from that area. While I would be hesitant to jump on board if Giovanni Bernard were to ever enter a role in which he was going to be asked to do a bit too much for the stage of his career that he's currently entering, but with him projected to start out this season as a role player on one of the league's best offenses, led by Tom Brady, a quarterback who makes a lot of his heyday in the short passing game. So when you look at it, this is really a match made in heaven. One thing we also can't rule out is the fact that Giovanni Bernard, being a savvy veteran who's had consistent years of success under his belt in the NFL, he could be a sneaky type of player to earn himself more playtime and more field time. With both Leonard Fournette as well as Ronald Jones struggling throughout several parts of their NFL careers, we cannot rule out the fact that they could have some struggles in the 2021 season yet again, paving the way for Giovanni Bernard to see more offensive snaps. The best part is, though, when it comes to fantasy draft days, you aren't going to have to pay for that potential upside. Most people looking to target him are only going to be looking to target him for his receiving floor, but there is a realistic path for him to see an increased amount of volume and workload in this offense. No one can deny the up and down struggles of both Ronald Jones as well as Leonard Fournette, but an elephant in the room as well is the health of both of those two players. Each of them has had a history of dealing with soft tissue injuries. If either player were to miss a significant amount of time, you could definitely expect that the workload and role of Giovanni Bernard would be expanded even further. With both Bruce Arians and Tom Brady valuing not only the availability of their players but the consistency as well, and with Giovanni Bernard checking off a lot of the boxes of need of that of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, many people on Fantasy Draft Day will be looking to target Giovanni Bernard for his receiving floor he brings from this offense, but the reality is he brings a lot more to the table than initially meets the eye, and the more you look into it, Bernard continues to look like a better and better fit. Alright guys, and we're moving into the next player on our running back sleepers list, and this player is none other than Zack Moss. Yes, this is a familiar name if you followed our offseason content from last year. Zack Moss was definitely a running back that we were very high on, and while many people will be quick to take their victory laps because no, Zack Moss didn't finish top 20 at his position, but we must keep in mind that a lot of the things that we did like about Zack Moss, a lot of things that we brought up in our pre-draft research process did ultimately hold true for the 2020 season. The first major factor of note was that Zack Moss would ultimately be the 1A to Devin Singletary's 1B. Zack Moss, being the bigger body player, would play more of a prominent role in the red zone, and although the year prior to that, the 2019 season, Devin Singletary was the premier pass catching back on this offense when Frank Gore was the only other running back capable, and in those situations, Devin Singletary was the running back of choice in the passing game, but we knew with the addition of Zack Moss, this would be another area where Moss would be competing for touches. With Zack Moss ultimately edging out Devin Singletary in many major areas, it was easy to see a 1A to 1B type scenario panning out, and that's exactly what we had in 2020. Ultimately, the only thing that truly held him back from reaching his full potential in the 2020 season was definitely his health. It took just 2 games in the 2020 season for Zack Moss to miss an extended period of time. Throughout that time, Devin Singletary really took over this backfield, even going as far as to receive double-digit touches in each of the first 8 games. And when a player is receiving double-digit targets through an 8-game sample, you're really going to expect a decent amount of production to follow suit. Unfortunately, that's where we got to see a glimpse of exactly how unproductive Devin Singletary can be at times. Despite being on one of the league's most efficient scoring offenses, Devin Singletary really wasn't able to consistently put it together. Through his first 8 games, he only had 1 rushing touchdown, ultimately finishing the season with just 2 rushing touchdowns, not even notching in any additional receiving touchdowns to go along with it. And although he was showing to be efficient in the run game, averaging 4.4 yards per carry on average throughout the 2020 campaign, this wasn't an area he was leaps and bounds better than Zack Moss in either. Zack Moss, even dealing with nagging injuries throughout the year, was even able to average 4.3 yards per carry himself, scoring on 5 separate occasions despite playing in 3 less games. And the one area, the receiving game, where Devin Singletary did have a chance to siphon some of the production and snaps away from Zack Moss, this was yet another area where he didn't prove to be leaps and bounds more efficient. In fact, a mere 0.2 yards per reception separated the two players, and with the sheer versatility that you gain with having Zack Moss on the field, it really begs the question as to what type of expanded role we could expect for Zack Moss for the 2021 season. If his health is able to be on his side and he's able to play in all games and be available for all games, we did see that they did lean on the side of Zack Moss to play that 1A to Devin Singletary's 1B, and with the team having plenty of opportunity to invest dollars in free agency into shoring up the running back position, the fact that they opted not to do that is a sign that they're definitely comfortable with the running backs that they have, maybe adding 1 more or 2 more in the draft. And unless we're talking about an investment of an early round pick, I would feel very comfortable with the role of Zack Moss expanding even further into the 2021 season. Currently, it's almost crazy to see exactly how low both of these Buffalo Bills running backs are going, both of which outside of the top 30, even pushing outside of the top 35. And I'll just have to say it that even if you are a person who's on the camp of Devin Singletary, I think there are a lot of people split on the Zack Moss side or the Devin Singletary side. I tend to see it as the safe side would be on the Devin Singletary just due to the health concerns. Anytime Zack Moss is unable to stay on the field, no amount of efficiency concerns are going to stop stop him from seeing field time. If you're in the Devin Singletary camp, then I can even see getting him that late in drafts is going to be a value. I tend to lean on the Zack Moss side and pretty heavily on the Zack Moss side, so I definitely see him being one of the better late round values in drafts, and definitely a player I will be looking to target at the running back position late on draft day. Alright guys, we're moving over to the next player, arguably one of the most polarizing players that we'll be discussing in any of these late round target videos, and this is going to be Lynn Bowden of the Miami Dolphins. Now when it comes to Lynn Bowden, we must understand this was a player initially drafted by the Las Vegas Raiders, who then had traded him to the Miami Dolphins. Lynn Bowden, easily one of the most versatile players in the entire 2020 draft class, even dating back to 2019 where he won the award for being the most versatile college football player. Clearly, this is a player who can run the ball, he can catch the ball, so what his exact role for 2021 and beyond is going to be largely up in the air. One thing that we do know for sure is that this offense for the Miami Dolphins, running through Tua, it definitely leans heavily on the short passing game, a factor that heavily favors the strength of a player like Lynn Bowden. And one of the best things about Lynn Bowden is when we look back and see how his production, targets, and volume were trending towards the tail end of the season, he was getting the most volume and workload towards the tail end of the year. While it can be very difficult to pinpoint how offenses are going to operate from one year to another, one thing we always like to look for is players who are trending up as the season progresses. This is 100% the case we have with Lynn Bowden, who actually received the most targets he had received all season long in his final game of the year. Over the final 4 games though, he was still a player receiving 8 targets per game, and while this was largely on the back of having injuries to a player like Jakeem Grant, this is a good indication of what his involvement could potentially look like from 2021 and beyond. One thing though that we do have to keep in mind is that there is a possibility that he loses his RB designation. This would force us to only be able to start him in the wide receiver slot or the flex slot, but we have seen in many years past a lot of gadget type players have the ability to be started as wide receiver, running back, or flex, which does give him an edge in these PPR and half PPR leagues where he could be started as a running back but get most of his work done in the passing game. Most recently, a player who we've seen fit that bill has been Cordero Patterson, famously playing for the same team, the Raiders, who felt comfortable enough to let go of a similar player in Lynn Bowden. Imagine being able to start a player in your running back slot who's receiving a massive 12 targets. No matter what work he does get in the running game is going to be negligible because you're going to more than make up for that in the receiving game. This is the exact type of situation we have to be aware of with Lynn Bowden come draft day. His designation is largely going to dictate his value. If he's only going to be designated as a wide receiver, he's definitely going to tank in the rankings, but there's no doubt whatsoever that if he's able to be started as a running back and his target market share is anything close to like what we saw through the final 4 games in which he was averaging 8 targets per game, then you could have some early season startability and somebody you could count on if you're dealing with injuries down the stretch at your running back position. Alright guys, we are moving into our final player in today's video, and that player is going to be Rashaad Penny of the Seattle Seahawks. While I have made another video where I did go further into depth with Rashaad Penny, this was before the team did go out and re-sign Chris Carson, so many of you out there may be wondering, what does that mean for a player like Rashaad Penny? One thing I want to be crystal clear about is that while Chris Carson is on the team, I don't think there is much of a shot for Rashaad Penny to ever overtake him without an injury, but the keyword in that sentence, without an injury, injuries are something that Chris Carson consistently deals with. While Chris Carson is on the field, there is no doubt from anybody that he does give it his all on every given play, but with that does always put your body at an increased level of risk. When it comes to the players playing behind Chris Carson, I do think Rashaad Penny is going to get a fair shake at potentially taking that second in line position. This is, of course, a player that they did draft in the first round who's still on his rookie contract. He has a 98th percentile college dominator rating, 88th percentile 40-yard dash, 92nd percentile height-adjusted speed score. This is a running back with massive size, 5'11", 220 pounds. And although he has largely been named a bust throughout his career, if you're looking back on his stats and what he's been able to produce, honestly, he's been rather efficient. We're talking about a player with a career yards per attempt ratio Seattle over 5 yards. Not quite known for his chops in the receiving game, yet still boasting over a 74% catch rate. And although injuries have definitely held him back throughout his young and early career, one thing that is for sure is that as soon as he was healthy enough to step on the field, the Seattle Seahawks wanted to immediately get him involved. In his first game back since recovering from an ACL tear, the Seattle Seahawks immediately gave him volume. That continued throughout the remainder of the season, which leads us to the current offseason we have, where Chris Carson was re-signed and there's a lot of question marks behind him. With Seattle having no massive investment in any other running back outside of Rashaad Penny, and with this being the last year that Rashaad Penny has on his rookie deal, the Seattle Seahawks have no choice but to get him involved and see what they have to see if there's any choice of them wanting to keep him and retain him for the future. This does let us know that while Chris Carson is healthy, he will at least be somewhat involved, which will give us somewhat of an idea of how the depth chart behind Chris Carson would pan out if there were ever an injury to Carson. If we know that Rashaad Penny is struggling, meanwhile running backs behind Chris Carson are looking better than Rashaad Penny is, then in that case there would be no need to want to keep rostering Rashaad Penny. But if we know Chris Carson is the lead back out there and Rashaad Penny is looking leaps and bounds better than any other backup in the Seattle backfield, then in that case I would definitely strongly advise for people to take stocks in Rashaad Penny, because we know a Chris Carson injury could happen at any moment. Don't get me wrong though, although I do say an injury to Chris Carson could happen at any moment, I'm not going to say Chris Carson's an extremely elevated injury risk. No, the running back position inherently is just a position that gets injured often, and his running style does play into the injury concerns a bit. With that said though, Chris Carson has always maintained the same running style he has had throughout his entire career with Seattle, so we're not expecting that to change, and this is still a running style that over the past 3 years has allowed him to play in no fewer than 12 games in a season. No running back realistically plays in all 16 games, and for him to have a 3-year low of 12 games played means we shouldn't just be relying on a Chris Carson injury and that being the only reason for rostering Rashaad Penny. In the later stages of drafts though, we're completely throwing out the floor that players have, so drafting backups is actually something that we want to try to do. Backups that are on offenses where if they were able to be that RB1 in that offense could provide us with top 20 upside, and undeniably if Rashaad Penny were to take over that RB1 slot in the Seattle offense, top 20 production is something we all could easily see from him. But guys, that's gonna do it for this video. We really hoped you enjoyed. If you did, how about hitting that like button? If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching and we'll catch you on the next one.